Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm Chisa Hasagawa.
And I'm Josh Farrell. Today on the program, learning with ADHD, struggles for young renters, transgender rights, a cafe supporting those with disabilities, and dating in the pandemic.
And we'll also have updates across sports, finance and weather. But first, to today's headlines. 4 new cases of COVID-19 have been reported this afternoon on top of the one recorded this morning. This brings the state total to 9. Authorities have linked Victoria's outbreak to hotel quarantine in South Australia. The Department of Health and Human Services has released 4 new Tier 1 exposure sites, including Jump Swim School in Bundoora, High Point Shopping Centre, Nando's and Woolworths in Epping and Epping North. Anyone who has visited these sites between the times stated on the Health Department website are to get tested immediately and quarantine for 14 days.
The Victorian Government has announced new coronavirus social distancing restrictions for Greater Melbourne in response to the latest outbreak. From 6 p.m. today, private gatherings in homes will be limited to 5 visitors per day and public gatherings will be limited to 30 people. Face masks will have to be worn indoors, including at all workplaces.
A 44-year-old Frankston South man has been arrested and charged with burglary in Langwarrin South. The man was located in the driveway of the property with a 12-gauge shotgun, a compound bow and ammunition in his car. He will appear in the Frankston Magistrates Court today.
South Australia has imposed fresh border restrictions on Victorians today. South Australian Police has said that anyone who has been to the exposure sites at the relevant times in the past week will not be allowed to enter the state. Anyone who arrived before the restrictions began will have to isolate for 14 days and be tested.
Queensland scientists have developed 2 drugs that could prevent COVID-19 infection and stop further spread in patients who have already contracted the virus. The drugs target the cell's response to the virus rather than the virus itself. The first is designed to prevent infection by blocking the virus from entering the cell. The second drug prevents the virus from replicating if someone was exposed. The drugs could be available to patients within 18 months if trials are successful.
The United Nations has said they are ready to provide assistance to Samoa if requested by the parties. This comes after Samoa's new Prime Minister, Fiame Naomi Matawhea, is sworn in, whilst incumbent Tuilaepa has refused to concede. The Secretary-General of the UN has urged the leaders to find a solution through dialogue that is best interest of the country.
A handful of Australian Olympic athletes have refused the COVID vaccine ahead of the Tokyo Olympic Games in July. Australian Olympic Committee CEO Matt Carroll has said some of these athletes have refused the vaccine on medical grounds, while others have had an objection to it. Japan is currently under a state of emergency, with the country reporting 12,000 deaths in total.
More than 200 people have been injured after 2 Metro light rail trains collided in Kuala Lumpur. The incident occurred at 8:45 local time when an empty train collided head-on with another train carrying 213 passengers. The trains were travelling opposite directions on the same track. The incident is still being investigated, but the District Police Chief suspects a miscommunication from the train's operations control centre. And those are the latest headlines.
Now to our first story. Online study has had its ups and downs for everyone, but for those with ADHD, the difficulties are hard to avoid. Damon Ralston has more.
For many students, online classes have been a blessing, eliminating daily commutes and giving students the comforts of studying at home. Though this isn't the case for everyone, Claire's a biomedical science student at RMIT University. She was diagnosed with ADHD last year, and the option of only online study has made learning much more complicated.
Having ADHD, I rely on that external motivation. So when I'm not in class with people or not having that total stimulation from other people around me or moving from room to room, it's been incredibly hard to actually sit down and do something.
Claire enjoys aspects of online study but is upset with the lack of innovation and use of interactive technology to make learning engaging.
I guess it's easy for me to study at home when I'm relaxed and ready to, but if I'm actually learning new content, I need that kinesthetic kind of touch to it, because if I'm not doing something with my hands, I am just looking out the window.
Associate Professor Mahesh Jarom is a psychiatrist who's been working to treat adults with ADHD for the past 5 years.
people with ADHD are very easily distractible with noise or other things going on around them. So it becomes quite a challenge to pay attention to something on screen when there's something else going on. People prefer on-campus education because it's sort of a contained environment. When they're on campus, they can focus on the lecturer.
Most universities have reverted back to on-campus classes.
While some classes at RMIT have returned on campus, the majority of them are still being presented online. Those students at RMIT are able to utilise on-campus study spaces, leading many people to question the continuing purpose of online classes. Newsline contacted RMIT for comment, but they failed to respond before deadline.
Claire hopes that universities can learn from this experience and better cater for those with different learning requirements.
It's 2021. Like, there's got to be some better options out there than a PowerPoint slide. Like, sorry, but it just doesn't work for everyone. Just really having that acceptance that, yes, students learn in different ways.
Damon Rouston, Newsline.
We're heading to a short break now. Coming up, we'll be hearing about the young renters crisis in Melbourne. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Newsline. The COVID-19 pandemic decimated Melbourne's inner city rental market. For the first time in years, some areas plunged by 12.8%, encouraging renters to take advantage of low costs. But now as the state recovers from last year's ongoing lockdowns, the market might be going back to normal sooner than expected. Isabella Podwinski has the story.
A recent report into Melbourne's rental sector shows Melbourne is becoming one of the country's cheapest cities to live in after COVID weakened the market last year. Despite scoring a bargain on their Kensington townhouse just 6 months ago, young couple Tessa Ogle and Sash Olympia may have to move out just halfway through their lease. But hunting for properties this time around feels a bit different.
Looking at places around this kind of area, there is nothing around for the price that we're paying for this, for the space that we're in as well.
While the couple's search has only just begun, they say they've already seen an increase in prices across the city.
Like I've already noticed within like the last month that you can see the jack up in prices so quickly.
But the latest data on Melbourne's rental market tells a different story. According to Domain's March 2021 rental report, Melbourne's average house prices have fallen 2.3%, down to $430 per week. Units are now on average $375 a week, the same price as 6 years ago.
Domain's rent report also found Melbourne is now one of Australia's most affordable cities to rent a house, joint with Perth but behind Adelaide. And while figures show rental vacancies are 182% higher than last year, it's still not that easy.
Irini Toledis-Noyce, Secretary of the Renters and Housing Union, says despite the slight drop in price, rental affordability still exists out of the realm for many people.
In terms of the overall average, we're still well above $400 a week for a property for someone who's a single mum with kids potentially. That's not affordable for most renters at this point.
While many thought COVID would provide a much-needed burst to Melbourne's soaring rental market, it might not stay that way for long.
It seems like we're coming out of the renters market and going back to the way it was and to it being a much more competitive place.
Isabella Podwinski, Newsline.
And now we have Daniel Cook joining us for international news. Mali's military has arrested 3 senior government members in a move experts labelled shocking but not surprising. What can you tell us about the arrests?
That's right. So 3 members of the Mali government, including President Ba Ndour, Prime Minister Mokhtar Ould, and Defence Minister Souleymane Ould, were arrested by the Mali military. It comes 9 months into what was supposed to be an 18-month transition to civilian rule. The trio are currently held in a military base that has a history. It was the site of the former president's resignation, and there was a mutiny in 2012 that led to his predecessor's resignation as well. The backdrop to all of this is that the country is dealing with instability. Since the coup last August, there has been a resurgence in Islamic insurgencies. There are 18,000 UN personnel there as part of its operations. There is also an EU task force there, primarily led by France.
And what has been the international response to this?
The response has been broadly negative, to say the least. The UN mission that I mentioned earlier called for the trio's immediate and unconditional release. The US State Department issued a similar statement. EU Council President Charles Michel said the bloc believed the arrests were a kidnapping. He told reporters that the EU was effectively willing to sanction Mali for this.
Moving to Belarus now. Yesterday we heard that the government there diverted a plane heading for Lithuania to the Belarusian capital. Can you give us an update on the situation there? How are the opposition journalists being treated?
So since yesterday, Roman Protasevich was seen in a video that was released on Telegram. He said he was being treated, quote, absolutely correctly. The video was called forced by several of his associates. They said that his stern posture in the video was a sign that he was being forced to say the things that he said. He also appeared in the video with what appeared to be a black eye. But in terms of Belarus more generally, in terms of the situation there, the EU has announced new measures. They've banned Belarusian airliners from flying over EU airspace, for instance.
So moving more locally now, this morning 200 people were injured in a train collision in the Malaysian capital of Kuala Lumpur. Can you tell us what happened there?
So there was a train collision in the capital. One train was empty and it was fresh from being repaired, heading one way in the tunnel. And then after what is being blamed on a communication error, another train came into the tunnel heading the opposite direction. The result of this was 213 people have been injured, a few dozen of which are serious and are being treated in hospital right now. After this, we saw social media videos of carriages with shattered glass on the floor and injured victims being carried on stretchers. The Transport Minister said that the collision was the first major accident in the metro system in nearly a quarter of a century.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
For transgender and non-binary people in Australia, the road to recognition is still fraught with controversy. A formal petition was introduced by the Australian Parliament as a means of combating the ever-present discrimination. Claudia Forsberg reports.
The Australian Parliament has introduced a petition calling for an acknowledgement of transgender and non-binary rights in Australia.
We would have the same chance at achieving our potential, the same chance at a quality of life, at quality, and I'll say equality, as the broader, to use the exact term, cisgender populations.
The petition was in response to a motion put forward by One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts, calling on the government to ensure all central government agencies are banned from using biologically distorted and gender-neutral language.
Restricting language like this restricts communication and education on issues both within the Australian government and to the Australian public, and it is a method for, it would lead to a form of systematic discrimination against trans and non-binary people.
The motion accepted by the House on 16 March contributes to the growing concerns around the increased risk of discrimination towards transgender and non-binary people by central, state and local agencies. The petition cites that harmful motions like that of Senator Roberts can contribute to the increased risk of suicide, self-harm and mental health issues among transgender and non-binary people. Transgender people aged 14 to 25 are 15 times more likely to attempt suicide than the general population. 41% of transgender people and non-binary people aged 18 years and older reported thoughts of suicide or self-harm in the last 2 weeks. The growing consensus amongst those who have already signed the petition, as well as advocates in the transgender and gender diverse community, is that the language outlined in Senator Roberts' motion should not be regulated by government officials, but should be a personal choice left up to individuals.
To governments at all levels, and I'd add in local government here in terms of service provision, let's sit down together and please listen to us with equality and respect, because what we need isn't really that hard to do.
The
Victorian Government has announced a 3-month-long construction blitz that will affect commuters on 9 major rail lines across Melbourne. Sky Mitchell is at Flinders Street Station with more on this story. Sky, can you give us an idea of how commuters are reacting?
These shutdowns come as Melburnians are just beginning to return back to the city for work. So I spoke to a commuter at Williamstown Station earlier to see how this will affect him.
I usually come by train so I don't have to drive. So it'll just take another hour out of my day, I suppose, and be very annoying.
So as you can hear there, this shutdown will add a bit more time onto the trip for the Williamstown line commuters during this 85-day period.
And why are they shutting down this rail line?
The Ferguson Street level crossing is going to be removed, so buses will replace trains between Williamstown and Newport during this time. The Ferguson Street level crossing is used by about 25,000 vehicles per day. Combine that with 110 trains passing through, and there's long delays for traffic, cyclists and pedestrians. And this particular crossing has a tragic safety record. In the 1990s, there was a double fatality there, and there has been 5 near misses in the past decade. These works are part of Victoria's level crossing removal project, which is the largest rail upgrade in the state's history.
And what other works are planned over the winter months?
There is a lot of other works planned over the next few months. Melbourne buses will replace trains along sections of the Lilydale line between the 10th and the 24th of July, and sections of the Frankston line as well between July 25 and August 1st. There will also be major disruptions for drivers on the Monash Freeway, the M80 Ring Road and the Westgate Freeway, with entry ramp upgrades and continuing widening works. Victorian Transport Minister Jacinta Allen says that the works need to be done in order for them to deliver the projects they have promised. So it's safe to say that winter in Melbourne is going to be a lot of disruptions for our commuters across the board.
Thanks for that, Sky. Next up, a Melbourne cafe providing job opportunities to those living with disabilities. More after the break.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Josh Farrell. A Melbourne cafe, all things equal, is providing new and exciting opportunities for those with a disability. They are a fresh take on an everyday cafe and providing purposeful jobs. Chloe Karras reports.
The environment at All Things Equal is inclusive and believes everyone deserves to be part of the community. A father realised there wasn't a variety of job opportunities for his daughter who had autism. He came together with other people to create a board, which is where the idea of the cafe came about.
Everyone's all very supportive of each other. Everyone helps each other out, and yeah, it's a very friendly place and a happy place. I've found that the cafe's really grown since then.
Since starting in January, Sam has learned how to communicate better. This is his first job.
It was very new, and I'm still sort of learning even after a few months or so.
About half of the employees at All Things Equal live with a disability, give them experience for future careers, but the cafe plans to branch out for more opportunities.
Whether it's an ice creamery, a bookstore, whatever it is, we've got so much ambition filled with fun. There's amazing vibes, amazing energy. Everyone just wants to be a part of it.
All employees have developed and learnt important skills while on the job, whether it is confidence, organisation or taking orders properly. They have all improved.
There's so many skills. It's not just sort of the skills of working at a cafe, but the soft skills as well, like working in a team, collaborating, learning off each other, where every single person can have an opportunity that otherwise they might be lacking or that it might not be available to them.
The experience the staff are gaining will give them more job opportunities for their future. Located in Balaclava, All Things Equal is a safe space for everyone with good food and coffee. Chloe Karras, Newsline.
Shamsia Hussainpour joins us now to talk about mental health within paramedics.
Thank you, Chisa and Josh. A recent study by RMIT and Swinburne University has found that more than a third of paramedics feel burnt out by their work and are experiencing significant amounts of stress. Sileng is a human resources manager specializing in promoting well-being in the workplace. Good afternoon, Sileng. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, good afternoon, Shamsia. Thank you for having me.
Why do you think paramedics experience increased psychological distress compared to professionals in other health fields?
Look, to our report, we do find that that levels of psychological distress is higher than the general population. But if we speak about paramedicine, it is regarded as one of the most dangerous jobs in Australia. But beyond that, findings from our research and recently published report indicates that the potential contributors to higher levels of psychological distress could be threefold here. First being the exposure to high levels of workplace violence. And this is not necessarily a new finding. There are published statistics on this and it's very much in tandem with what we've found. On average, a paramedic is assaulted in Victoria every 50 hours. So to a certain extent, this is also evident in our report findings. Second is the issue of work intensification. Our report found that 4 in 5 respondents indicated that in their jobs they're required really to work very fast, and they have also a lot less time in terms of sufficient recovery and rest between shifts. And these high levels of workload in part is also exacerbated by inadequate staffing levels and higher demands for ambulance services especially during this time. And our study was conducted in September 2020, so that was the height of the strict lockdown here in Victoria. So in the context of the pandemic as well, having to engage in also excessive amounts of additional tasks, such as having to deep clean a vehicle when a potential COVID-19 patient has been transported, just adds a layer to that already very high workload. And the third being the importance and the contributing factor potentially here of the workplace culture. So in our same study, we found reports of significant bullying among paramedics. Between 14 and 25% of our respondents indicate that bullying behaviors are a commonplace.
Interesting. And recent studies show that almost 9% of paramedics are looking to leave their profession within the next year, while 30% consider quitting. What's being done to support their mental health, and how do we encourage them to stay in the profession?
That's a very important question. And what is coming out of the findings of our reports is this theme for increasing need to consider and prioritize workforce sustainability. And within this, our report highlights several areas to carefully consider in terms of the issues of burnout, as you have noted earlier, where we find that over a third of our respondents indicating that they often always feel burnt out because of their work. And linked to this, of course, closely are issues around work intensification, which I've spoken to, which is also an aspect of work climate, which requires attention if we're looking at retaining this important segment of the healthcare workforce. And really everything that we've found that emerging from our report, that is all within management's scope to be able to rectify. So in terms of exactly what needs to be done, that would be up to Ambulance Victoria to consider and to address in terms of meeting the needs of the staff so as to prevent further, of a workforce shortage issue. And in part, look, adequate resources, of course, will likely be helpful in terms of ameliorating some of these issues that we've discussed today. So the allocation of that budget to increasing Ambulance Victoria's capacity over the next 4 years might just be coming at a much needed time. So we look forward to seeing signs of improvements on these indicators, hopefully in the next time that we conduct this survey and this study.
And research also found that 2/3 of paramedics are afraid to admit their mistake because it would be held against them. What could be done to change this, I guess?
Yes, that's a good question. Look, with that, building a workforce and a workplace culture as one that really emphasizes trust and psychological safety would be key. And that means basically building a sense of confidence and safety that you and I and individuals within that workplace will not be fearful that we'll be attacked, ridiculed, or penalized for simply voicing our ideas or for speaking up.
And more than ever, we are in need of these professionals. So why do you think, and why do you think it's important to keep them in this profession, as well as how do we encourage them to stay?
Yeah, that's definitely a very important consideration. So in terms of keeping these individuals in the workforce, I would go back to the key points that we've spoken about in terms of taking that long-term and workforce sustainability mindset and looking at prioritizing both physical and mental health well-being. So really looking at issues of burnout and work intensification closely.
Thank you very much, Xiling. We're running out of time now. Thank you very much for spending the time and having a chat with me this afternoon.
Most
Back
welcome.
to you, Josh.
Pleasure. Thank you.
To our next story now, and Zara Ahmed reports on the struggles of Australia's textile industry.
Most Australians wear clothing that is made overseas. In fact, only 5% of clothing consumed here is produced locally. The majority of brands source and manufacture overseas in order to compete within the global apparel market.
So for those brands that want to compete within the sector, obviously they have to be cost sensitive and they make a higher profit on a product that's been produced at a lower cost.
But it's not just the temptation of cheap manufacturing that attracts brands to offshore production. Most refined materials cannot be found in Australia. Melbourne-based label Gull explains the challenges of finding ethical suppliers.
Overseas, I have a list of questions that I ask that usually helps me get to the bottom of whether or not a supplier knows where their fabric or their materials is coming from and whether it's really sustainable or they're just putting a sustainable label on it.
With many franchise businesses taking over the industry and the online retail boom, small brands have been forced to hike up their prices to get by.
Brands that produce locally, they do face higher production costs. However, they also face a loss of skills because with the majority of the products being manufactured overseas, we have lost a lot of manufacturing skills locally.
But many local labels aren't striving for large profits. Like Gull, they hope to inspire people to think about where their clothing is coming from and to treat their garments as sustainable investments.
It's part of a bigger conversation around being sustainable, wearing what you have and valuing what you have is a big part of that, whether that comes from a sustainable label, whether it's thrifted, or whether it comes from fast fashion.
As the conversation around unethical practices becomes prevalent in Australia, more consumers are taking a stance against cheap labour and are now recognising the value of local brands. Zara Ahmed, Newsline.
Australia's largest diverse short film festival is currently underway. The St Kilda Film Festival began on Thursday last week and ends on Saturday, with both online and in-person sessions on site now playing. Reporter Lydia Manshi joins us now to tell us more. Hi Lydia, so where are you currently?
Yes, hi Josh. I'm currently at St Kilda Town Hall. It is a suburb, is currently hosting the St Kilda Film Festival at the Astor Theatre and Alex Theatre.
Can you tell us more about the Under the Radar event?
Sorry?
Can you tell us more about the Under the Radar event?
Under the Radar event, yeah. So Under the Radar is happening on Thursday at 6:30. It's a free event, however, booking is required. So if people are keen to attend the film event, they need to book online, as there will be no counter sales.
In terms of the new restrictions, how are they going to impact the film festival?
Yeah, so we heard the Deputy Premier James Merlino's announcement this morning about the new restrictions. He did say that there are going to be no change of rules for bars and sports and restaurants, so it includes venues and cinemas. And I also spoke to the festival director, Richard Suwada, and he told me that they are going to cancel a couple of programs, including the family animation, as well as the Shifting the Gaze, which focuses on women filmmaking. But these will be streamed online, so people are still able to watch it, just not be there in person.
Thanks, Lydia. We're now heading to a short break. Coming up next, we have the Roundup with Jacqueline Stanley and Carla Yeager. Stay with us.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Roundup. I'm Carly Yeager.
And I'm Jacqueline Stanley. In the Roundup, we're going to be looking at some of the biggest stories across arts, tech and the papers. But first, let's take a look at today's headlines from across the globe. The New York Times homepage features a story about the end of remote learning options in New York City schools. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio announced face-to-face learning will recommence when the city's semester returns in September of this year.
The Australian mouse plague is making headlines even in the UK. The BBC interviewed Australian farmers on the unrelenting plague, which is ripping through rural Australia.
In India, several thousands of people are set to be evacuated from the northeast coastline ahead of an approaching cyclone. Cyclone Yas is likely to make landfall around noon tomorrow local time.
Al Jazeera are reporting on a massacre of 14 people in remote cocoa growing region of Peru, including 2 children. Authorities are blaming the attack on a Maoist rebel group in response to the country's upcoming election.
The South China Morning Post is leading with a story about 4 computer-generated pictures of a new stealth bomber aircraft, which have been released. The Xi'an H-20 has been under development for the years and photos of it have never officially been disclosed. And that's it for the papers.
And now to tech news. The US state of Florida has announced a new bill which aims to punish tech companies for deplatforming politicians. Our tech reporter, Shay Parisi, joins us from the streets of Melbourne. So Shay, what exactly is this new bill?
Thanks, Carla. Florida Governor overnight, Ron DeSantis, signed a first-in-the-nation bill that can ban tech companies from deplatforming politicians. Legislation states that platforms can only suspend accounts for 14 days, and companies will be fined $330,000 Australian dollars if they exceed the limit. The bill is expected to go into effect on July the 1st. I spoke with a few Melburnians today around the streets of Melbourne to get their thoughts on the new bill.
And we're just waiting for these to come up.
So the Florida governor and Mr. Trump are known to have a close relationship. Do you think that there is a link between the introduction of this bill and Trump's personal interests?
Many experts are quite sceptical that DeSantis' relationship with Trump has inspired the new bill. This comes after Trump was suspended from YouTube and banned on Facebook and Twitter at the end of last year during the US election campaign. But DeSantis maintains that the bill was in the best interest of Floridians and not in any way tied to any political motivations.
And is there a chance that this bill might have a flow-on effect to legislation here in Australia?
Not at the moment, but there is a chance that maybe a domino effect may be seen, like with the Facebook news censoring scenario this year. So we'll have to wait and see with that one.
In our next tech story, closer to home, the CSIRO have urged people to use a mouse alert app in response to the current plague. Shay, tell us more.
Yeah, so the CSIRO has encouraged the use of app Mouse Alert, which is pretty much used to report and track the mouse infestations and sightings that are occurring throughout New South Wales at the minute in particular. The online platform displays hundreds of red icons that are aimed to indicate where mouse infestations are being reported. This is across hundreds of kilometres throughout Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland. Anyone can actually report the sightings through the app themselves.
And with mouse now crossing over into Victoria, what's behind this plague?
Yeah, so farmers are having their crops destroyed severely by this mouse infestation seen across the 3 states. And the conditions over summer have seen mice breed very rapidly and at a pace that authorities have been struggling to contain.
According to this map, what areas are most affected?
So the map shows that heavy concentrations of mice, particularly in the northern tablelands, central west, and New England areas of New South Wales, but as you can see, scattered across the 3 states as well.
Thanks, Shay. Now a look to the arts. We are joined on the panel by Sarah Lilly. Last night on ABC's 7:30 program, the CEO of Sydney Opera House, Louise Herron, spoke about recent claims of structural racism.
Well, in 2016, a man who wore blackface at the Sydney Opera House at a trivia night was removed by staff members shortly after he attended. This has led to a full investigation into the systemic racism at the Sydney Opera House.
So what was the organisation's response?
Well, the CEO, Louise Herron, AM, wrote to her senior leadership team in March, "It is very important that we understand how systemic racism is manifested here and what we need to do to overcome it."
And is there anything being done within the organisation that we need to know about?
Well, as you can imagine, there's a lot of things going in the Opera House, but something that's quite relevant to mention is the First Nations program, which aims to celebrate and embrace Australia's First Nations people.
On to our next story now. American actor Kevin Spacey is set to return to the limelight in a new movie. As you may know, he has faced allegations of pedophilia from boys as young as 14. What's the new role, Sarah?
Well, Spacey is playing the role of a police officer in an Italian pedophilia drama. As you can imagine, the controversial move this is, considering the sexual abuse allegations against Spacey dating all the way back to 1995.
Wait, so he was effectively cancelled because of the allegations. So it seems like a controversial choice of a role to make a comeback in, don't you think?
100%. I think playing a role so closely linked to sexual abuse of children is too bold of a move for Spacey to make, despite these allegations never being actually proven.
Right, and how's the announcement being received?
I think that despite allegations never being proved, there'll be a lot of people questioning Spacey's move in the media.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, Carla, let's take a look at today's political cartoons.
We are joined by our reporter, Rhiam Al-Asri. So we are looking at The Guardian, which is looking at Rio Tinto's destruction of the sacred site on Jackan Gorge. Rhiam, tell us more.
Yes, so this commemorates the anniversary of the discussion of the sacred site at Jackan Gorge by mining giant Rio Tinto. It's a critique of what they feel is a half-hearted apology from Rio Tinto, motivated more by public image than actual remorse. It suggests shareholders are more concerned with backlash than the company had destroyed one of the sacred places of an oppressed minority group. It takes final shot at the Western Australian government for not acknowledging the First Nations rights.
Now looking to The Age, what are commenters saying about vaccine hesitancy in Australia?
Well, the vaccine hesitancy is still a big problem in Australia. This cartoon is showing that people are panicking more than they are getting vaccinated. Most people are rushing to get vaccinated. However, some people are concerned about the claims about the blood clots from the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And our last cartoon for the day, opposition leader Anthony Albanese, has been featured in The Australian about Australia's energy future. What's that all about?
So the opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, has outlined his plan for Australia to emerge as a renewable energy superpower. He released a $100 million plan to fund more new energy jobs, including big-scale renewable projects. It's becoming a political game instead of about climate change and renewable energy.
Thanks for that, Rhiam. And that's the roundup for today.
Thanks to our other reporters Shay Parisi and Sarah Lilly. For the roundup today, I'm Jacqueline Stanley.
And I'm Carly Yeager. We're going to take a short break now, and then we'll be back with sport, weather and finance.
Now it's time for sport, with reporter Sean Mortel joining us for the latest updates. Sean, the AFL may once again be facing quick changes due to COVID-19.
Yeah, so far the AFL has announced today that ticket sales for all Melbourne matches in the next 2 rounds will be paused. They'll wait to make a call on crowd sizes after the Victorian government weighs up the COVID risk going forward. 3 clubs are off to the AFL tribunal tonight to challenge player bans, with the biggest case being that of Gold Coast player Nick Holman. The Suns are challenging the 2-match ban given to Holman for a tackle on Geelong's Mitch Duncan that left the Cats midfielder concussed. Many in the AFL world have defended Holman and his tackling technique, saying that Duncan's concussion was an accident. Both Carlton and Richmond will also head to the tribunal to challenge the suspensions handed down to Lockie Plowman and Marlon Pickett. In the NBL last night, Melbourne United moved one step closer towards securing the top spot on the table with a 99-88 win over the Brisbane Bullets. United captain Chris Goulding starred with 22 points in a win that makes Brisbane's chances of playing finals even slimmer. And that's all for sport. Back to you, Chisa and Josh.
2020 threw the certainty of Australia's favourite sporting codes into complete chaos. But it wasn't just in the major cities where the impact on sports was felt. Casper McLeod explores what the impact of no footy was on regional Victorian communities and what it's like now that footy has returned.
Shepparton, Northern Victoria. This is a reserves game between the Shepparton Bears and Seymour Lions. Last year, this league, along with many other country footy leagues across Australia, had to be put on pause due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, play has resumed. Paddy Grinley is an umpire in the Western Region Football League. He used to umpire in the Riddle District Football League in country Victoria. He was one of many involved in country footy impacted by the pandemic last year.
Footy for me was more obviously like umpiring. I'd get some cash out of it and fitness, what have you, but I'd also have that sort of community involvement every weekend, which I really cherish and really look forward to every week. So all of a sudden you don't have those interactions, you don't have those games. Everyone talks about umpiring like you get yelled at a lot, and you do, but you also meet a lot of wonderful people in local footy leagues, especially in that league with country footy.
Michael Van Dorser is a commentator for 1FM Shepparton Radio.
It's great to see people getting back out and about and really just getting to interact with people again. I think that's been the biggest thing.
For these local communities, not having local footy on in 2020 was tough.
It was difficult for all the clubs for so many different reasons. One being not just the factor of being around people on a Saturday afternoon.
All across Australia, including here in Victoria's capital, sporting leagues, professional and not professional, were put on hold. These include country football leagues, where across Victoria and Australia, the pandemic wreaked havoc.
Casper McLeod.
And now to finance with Matt Parnell. Matt, tell us what's going on with today's markets.
Thanks, Josh. In the Australian market, the ASX 200 is up 0.76% to 7,099 points. Today's best performing stocks include Zimplatz Holding Limited and Galaxy Resources, both gaining more than 3%. International markets are also on the rise. The Dow Jones rose 0.54%, the Nikkei rose 0.44%, and the Nasdaq was the strongest performing, growing 1.41%. This Elon Musk tweet led to a 2% spike in the price of Bitcoin in 15 minutes this morning. In spite of this, the market is already falling back towards where it began today. $1 Australian dollar is buying 77 US cents, $1.07 New Zealand cents, 63 euro cents, 54 pence or 84 yen. On to commodities. The price of gold has been steadily falling all day and currently sits at $2,420 an ounce. Silver is also down 18 cents to $35 an ounce. Brent crude has risen 3% overnight, while WTI crude has fallen 0.11%. That's finance.
Thanks, Matt.
Now to weather from Melbourne and around the country with reporter Casper McLeod.
Thanks, Josh. I was supposed to be outside today doing this report, but it started to rain. It is indeed a wet one here in Melbourne, and it is set to continue today. Tops of 20 degrees and low of 10. Around the country tomorrow, 60% chance of rain in Melbourne, 15 degrees tops. Sydney, 23% chance rain, 23 degrees tops. Beautiful days both in Brisbane and Perth, sunny in both of them, 25 degrees, in Brisbane, 21 degrees in Perth. In Adelaide, 50% chance of rain tomorrow with a top of 17. Meanwhile, in Darwin, it's a scorcher at 33 degrees tomorrow. No chance of rain. In Hobart, the exact opposite. It's a cold one, 15 degrees tops, 70% chance of rain. And in Canberra, it's even colder, even wetter at 80% chance of rain at 14 degrees. And just a shout out to Albany in WA. This week they've struggled with hail and snow and now rain as well today. Don't worry, those in Albany, WA, tomorrow should bring the sunshine. That's all for Newsline Weather. I'm Casper McLeod. Back to you, Chazza and Josh.
And that concludes Newsline for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Josh Farrell.
And I'm Chisa Hasegawa. Have a great week.